the recruiting guru at Horns247, one and only Hank South. Hank, we were just talking about Torrey Becton and how he's the culture coach, and guy seems to get interest from other teams, the NFL, other college programs every year. But Steve Sarkisian has been able to hang on to him. What's your take on Torrey Becton?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes hand in hand from, you look at all the successful programs across the country, and typically you have an established strength staff for the teams that have the most success. I think, Alabama with Scott Cochran for all those years. I can't think of Georgia's strength coach off the top of my head, but he's been around for a while. Oregon, Miami has a pretty good one. But no, I mean, like you said, culture coach, they're kind of the guys. They're the guys that the players see the most. They can be around the players the most, essentially, aside of the time the coaches can spend with the team. So they're kind of like, one of the main guys, and oftentimes really important in recruitments. I look back to Najee Harris's recruitment when he was looking at maybe flipping to Michigan. And one of the big things for him, like Najee Harris, you guys didn't follow his recruitment, I'm sure, but he didn't say anything. Like he was committed to Alabama, but he wouldn't really even say that. Like it was the weirdest thing, and he wouldn't talk about recruiting, but he would talk about like the strength coach. And one thing he mentioned to me, like when we were trying to kind of get an idea of where he was going to actually end up, was that he was always texting with Scott Cochran at Alabama. And so you kind of put that away and think about it. Like, that was a big deal for Najee Harris, was the conditioning, strength and conditioning and all that. So that was kind of, that was my kind of piece I kept on the back burner, when thinking about where he was going to actually end up. But no, I mean, huge piece for the staff and a big, part of their success that we've seen.
Well, that's a great point, Hank, because like I've never thought about it like that. Like guys texting the strength coach, because if I were a player, I would want to know, hey, what do I need to work on in the offseason to make me stronger, to make me better? Like, what do I need to prepare for to when I get on campus, I'm not blindsided by anything?
Yeah. Yeah, they're the offseason coach. Like they're the guys that are, like I said, they're going to spend the most time with them. They're going to know them, probably better than most. A lot of the coaches probably know them. When it comes to developing them. So yeah, I mean, they're a huge critical piece to the overall program.
All right, Hank, huge junior day for Texas over the weekend. I'll just let you take us through the highlights. You and Jordan Scruggs were down there on campus. Looked like a great turnout.
Yeah, for how cold it was, the list was about 100 people that we were expecting on our leading up to it. And I would say, I feel like about 80% of the guys showed up. I mean, it was 19-degree feels like temperature at the start of it. But guys rolled in. And yeah, great turnout. Obviously, these kind of recruiting events is tough to, really get a lot of one-on-one time. And, obviously when you have a big support staff and you have people in place like Texas does, it makes it a little bit more, I guess, you can have more of an impact, I guess, with that many people on campus. And I think Texas did a good job of managing all that. It was the first time this year, they've had, a bunch of guys like this on campus. They got there, started about 9 a.m. They welcomed them into Moncrief. They did, meet and greet and said hello. And then they took all of them over to the basketball game, which turned out to be a really great atmosphere for recruits to be at with the big buzzer beater win. Then they came back and it was most, the event formally ended at 2, but obviously, kids can hang around on campus. We were interviewing guys till about 6, I think. So, a great turnout. I think obviously we saw 2 commitments come out of it with Racine Guillory, the 2026 running back from Aledo, and then Lance Jackson, the 2025 defensive lineman from Pleasant Grove. And so I think they, did a good job of, connecting with these kids first time this year, kind of to build that momentum into the spring. It was a chance for Johnny Nansen to meet a lot of these defensive recruits, linebackers, defensive linemen. He was connecting with those guys. Just overall, I think just it was a really good day for Texas, and I think they did a really good job of managing that many people and making sure they all felt like they were being noticed and welcomed with that many kids around.
Yeah. Talk about Lance Jackson a little bit, Hank. Texarkana kid, defensive lineman. He mentioned Pete Kwiatkowski and Steve Sarkisian were huge in his recruitment, obviously, but he talked about how much he loved Texas. Talk about him as a player and how he could fit in the PK system.
Yeah, I think, he's listed as a defensive lineman, and I think he'll probably end up playing edge. I think he'll play on the outside, probably more of like an Ethan Burke type role, I think, as he continues to fill out. But again, he's a big kid. He could put on weight, play inside. But he's probably one of the more impactful, kind of one of the edge defensive line guys in this class. Texas targeted him really early. And it's actually interesting. His older brother, Landon, started at LSU, then transferred to Arkansas. And Washington was one of his top schools for his recruitment. And a big part of that was Pete Kwiatkowski. And so that connection with Lance, obviously was still there. And that helped Texas a lot. Obviously, in-state recruits, they're loading up on defensive linemen this cycle. So, that was another big piece of that too. But a really impressive kid. I think, nobody's a must get ever really. But, I think in terms, you want to keep that kind of talent home. Especially, when he has ties to Arkansas, LSU obviously got his older brother early on and then Arkansas, but, I guess Texarkana's kind of that gray area where it's, which one
half
is actually
of it's
home.
Arkansas and half of it's in Texas.
Like home state. But no, Texas got it done. And it was actually a little bit earlier than we thought it would. I think, we projected him to be in the class, but it was more, probably maybe a summer decision. But, again, he got on campus, and that just goes to show the collective effort of the staff. Don't even have a defensive line coach in place, and you're landing defensive linemen. So, I think that just shows how comfortable he was with Texas. And, obviously we'll gauge his reaction when a hire is made and go from there. But big pickup with Lance Jackson.
Yeah. And Racine Guillory too. Yeah. Like you wrote that you weren't really expecting a commitment this early.
Yeah.
But kind of like Lance Jackson got a feeling. Racine Guillory, tell us about him.
Yeah, it was funny because when he was leaving, we actually didn't get a chance to catch him. So the recruits take a shuttle, and you try to interview him as they're all coming off. And he actually had a cameraman with him. So he was a big time visit, but he got in his car, drove off real fast. And we were like, oh, we'll get him on the phone later. And then there was I guess it was his grandfather or someone made a post on Facebook saying, big time Texas commit, and kind of gave it away, I guess, a little bit. And but we got word that he wanted to make his own announcement. So obviously, we're not going to spoil a kid's post. And then of course on Saturday night he popped. But Aledo can produce some talent. They were obviously one of the state powerhouses and have been for a long time. We've seen guys like Jonathan Gray, Jace McClellan, who is about to be an NFL draft pick. A bunch of guys from Aledo, JoJo Earl. List could go on. But no, big time talent, 2026. So it's still early. You got to imagine his recruitment's going to probably keep going. But, Texas loves this kid. They were really excited about him. You have to really love a kid when you take a commitment their sophomore year. I think every class you can kind of expect to be a 2 running back class. I don't think it's over, by any means with other guys. There's another big target, Javion Osborne, that was on campus, and they actually posted a picture together that, those could be Texas's 2 running back commits in 2026. So big time get. I think I had his stats pulled up just a minute ago. He was 17 touchdowns this past season, 1,200 yards, caught 10 passes for 175 yards, another 4 touchdowns. So, kind of a guy that can catch a ball out of the backfield, make things happen out of the backfield, and just really talented kid that, a nice way to kick off the 2026 class for Texas.
Tashard Choice is a beast.
He is.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of him being a beast, you mentioned earlier in the season when we were talking to you, Hank, I don't know what day it was, but you mentioned Jared Gibson, and I kind of just was like, man, Jared Gibson going to have to wait his turn like the rest of these guys because Jonathan Brooks and Cedric Baxter and Jaden Blue. But I've been seeing pictures, and I'm like, yo, this dude has a college body already. Hell, NFL body. The way that he looked compared to some of the other running backs, like this dude's coming in from IMG. Yeah. He looks ready to play now. Obviously, he has to learn the playbook and stuff. But, yeah, man, I apologize for just kind of ragging you off when you mentioned Jared Gibbs because I was like, he's just going to have to wait his turn. You said he might come in and get some clock, and now I'm thinking he might.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just goes to show, a lot of these kids are more and more college ready as as high schools and their strength programs develop, and, kids are just, they're starting training earlier in their life, and, they're just more college ready. And especially when you come from a program like IMG Academy, which is essentially a college. I mean, these kids move to Florida and live in dorms at IMG. They go through, college courses and, strength programs, nutrition plans. And so, when you get to campus, it's not as much of a, steep learning curve for them. And so, yeah, you never know. Obviously, you got guys coming back that are established, but, Baxter was the starting running back in the beginning of the season. And obviously Jonathan Brooks, came in and did his thing, but, just goes to show, if you can play, they're going to play you. And maybe Jared Gibson could show out early and maybe get some time next year, early in the season.
Yeah, he's from Jonesboro, Georgia, right?
Yeah, so he was in Georgia, and then I think he's originally from, and I need to double check this. I think he's from Gainesville originally, and that's why the Florida appeal was there. Then I think there was a stint in Georgia, then he went back to IMG. So he's from that southeast Georgia Florida territory. So another huge recruiting win. He was a Florida commit at one point, and I think Georgia was mentioned trying to flip him late, but again, Tashard Choice, when he locks in on a guy, like, there's not a lot of coaches, and I mean, you have to, like, it's case by case, but like, there's not a lot of coaches where you say, like, if he wants him, like, he's probably going to get him, and they're probably not going to lose him, and that's kind of just Tashard Choice. So that's been the case from my time covering them, and I don't see it really, slowing down.
I mean, he's the honey badger. He gets whoever he wants.
Yeah. He helped on Ryan Wingo too. He Chris Jackson gets the credit on Wingo and Sark, obviously, but Tashard Choice was part of that as well, and sealing the deal.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So he's starting to be like Jeff Banks. Jeff Banks can recruit any position.
Yeah. Yep. We've seen him active in Georgia. Obviously, he's got the Georgia Tech ties, but a guy like Emory Winston, he was involved with. He's
Jameer Gibbs,
IMG, so it's not just. Gavin Nix was a linebacker that visited this past weekend from IMG. And, after Jeff Choate left, he was saying, Tashard Choice kept the relationship going with him in the connection to Texas. So he's a linebacker. So, wow. Jack of all trade position recruiter.
Yeah.
Yeah. He recruited Jameer Gibbs to Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Jameer Gibbs talks very highly of Tashard Choice.
Yeah.
I'm coming around on Jameer Gibbs. You know what I'm saying?
He's a stud. He's a stud.
I was like, how did they not take Jalen Carter? How'd the Lions not take Jalen Carter? Yeah. Now I'm like watching Gibbs palm Antonio Winfield Jr. into the turf.
Yeah.
After scoring a touchdown, I'm like, ooh, yeah.
What's crazy about Jameer Gibbs is he blew up late his senior season from Dalton, Georgia. And his film came out, and it was just like, it's what you see now. Like, he was just running all over the place. And it looked like his tape was like being sped up. Like, it didn't look real. And everyone was like, oh, they're speeding up his tape. That's not real. It was really him. Like, he was that good. And just like, and so, he went to Georgia Tech, obviously transferred to Alabama, and, the rest is history. Now he's like one of the, making a Super Bowl run. So good kid. Yep.
Hank, what do you think about Amari Niblack going to Texas? We haven't talked to you since that move. Obviously, you covering Alabama, in your past, you knew about somebody like Niblack. And I've been saying all year long, after Brock Bowers and JT Sanders, he was the third tight end for me in the nation. I think it's a huge get for Jeff Banks and Steve Sarkisian. Yeah,
he's a stud. And I'll credit Alabama on that. They worked him out in camp in, I think it was June of 21. And he wasn't really known. Like, he didn't have a lot of buzz. And they offered him, they took a commitment from him, and everyone was like, who is this kid? And everyone was like, well, just watch. He's a project, but, he's going to be special. And, we've seen that. He kind of had his coming out party against Texas. It wasn't like a huge game, but, he kept them in the game against Texas with that big touchdown catch. I think it was in the third quarter, maybe early fourth. Yeah. Length, speed, he's like a big wide receiver. He's just like a really strong, athletic, long kid that can, absolutely fill that, the void that JT Sanders leaving is creating. And so, when he entered the portal, it was like, you kind of just felt like, once he was in, it's like, okay, Texas is going to make a move here. And they did. And, I think he was, everyone, he came on the visit last week, and he announced his commitment, everyone's like, did he just land in Austin? Like he it was like got there and committed. And, that was what we were reporting was expected. And that's what happened, huge get. And the fact that he's on campus now and can enroll now, that's big because the other tight end, Ben Urosek, they were recruiting from Stanford. He was a summer guy. So, he might've had to, wait a little bit longer, or, figure out things. But now, having Niblack in and could work on that chemistry with Quinn Ewers and be ready for the season. That's huge.
Do you think they're still talking to Urosek, the Stanford tight end, or no?
I have not heard yet. I would think they're just going to go with Niblack, but I'll need to double check on that. You keep thinking like, obviously we think Texas is probably, still going to look at defensive linemen. They obviously got Tia Savea today, but it's like you keep thinking Texas might be done, and then another guy pops up in the portal, and it's like, oh, there's a spot for him probably. And so, you don't want, especially with there's a whole nother portal window too. So, obviously it'll depend on, which guys leave in the spring, once, spring ball's over. So yeah, we'll see on a second tight end.
What else is, on the horizon or anything to watch for?
Yeah. I think still, obviously, I would think Texas is still going to be in the market for another defensive lineman. Again, they added the Arizona kid today, and I'm just going to call him Tia Savea. I've seen people call him Tia Savea. So that's what I'm going with. And I wrote in the story, it's much needed. They were down some guys. Obviously, they let DeAndre Robinson out of his letter of intent last week, and he's going to Florida. You're losing Murphy and Sweat. And you got talent coming back, but you need bodies there. And to get a guy like him, who he hasn't had like the biggest numbers or anything, but he's been around. He's been to UCLA, he's been to Arizona, and he's played a lot. And a guy that I'm sure Johnny Nansen vouched for, and he has a solid track record at guys that he's developed and coached and recruited, and so I'm sure he vouched for him with Sark. And I think it could be a really key pickup, and at least in terms of depth. But I think Texas will still look for maybe probably another one. We'll see. Melvin Hills is a defensive line signee that he's not enrolling until the summer, but I think he could maybe be one to watch. Depending on how he reacts to the new defensive line hire, kind of like DeAndre Robinson. I think Melvin Hills is probably a little bit more solid though than him. And we're keeping an eye on Jabbar Muhammad, the cornerback from Washington. He looks like he's still intent on visiting Oregon this weekend, so might be a little bit longer before we get some clarity on that. But Texas
he visited
is right there
Texas, and then he went to Alabama. Is that right?
Right. And so he visited Texas last week, starting on Wednesday, left on Thursday afternoon, and we spoke to sources. They thought it went really well. There was optimism on Texas's end. And I think for good reason. He talks about wanting to go to an established program, a team that's, there's stability. And, you look at Alabama, I don't want to say there's no stability at Alabama, but I mean, there's coaching turnover, they're going through a transition. So it's not the stablest of situations that he could be in. Oregon's obviously stable. But we'll see. I think Alabama impressed him a lot. They need him probably more than Texas and Oregon do. But I think there's a spot for him at Texas. Obviously he could be opposite of Manny Muhammad, Cousins. Everyone's saying, they want Muhammad Island or Muhammad Islands to be a thing next year. So we'll see on that. And then, of course we'll watch the Oregon visit as well. They're one of the few programs in the country that, from an NIL perspective and just from, what Dan Lanning's been able to do can really pitch guys and recruit well, in comparison to Texas right now. So Jabbar Muhammad, defensive line, we're still watching. And then, from there, and another thing I should say, Ryan Williams is officially visiting this weekend. The 5-star wide receiver that's uncommitted right now. Bama had him on the campus this past weekend. They're making an all-out push to they're trying to make Ryan Williams, Kalen DeBoer's Julio Jones, kind of, how, Julio Jones was the first big recruit Nick Saban got when he came to Alabama. And so they're trying to make that comparison with Ryan Williams, which, it's fair. He's a really talented kid. So he'll be on campus this weekend, He's going to finish out at Auburn the following weekend and then make a decision on signing day. There's a spot for Ryan Williams in the class. I don't think he's going to end up at Texas. I just, I would be surprised, but I don't want to say they're out of it. They've surprised me a couple times this class with,
who's your comp for Ryan Williams?
Ooh. He's a Justin Jefferson type player to me. That's my comp. Just in terms, like, he's just like, he makes it look really easy. Like, his movements are like really effortless. He's a really great route runner. Obviously, speed. He's the production. I mean, just he kind of just the way he carries himself is very Justin Jefferson-esque to me. But I mean,
isn't him and KJ Lacey tight?
They're very tight, and they've talked about wanting to play together. And KJ Lacey visited Alabama on Sunday. So, that's going to be a recruitment that, people are going to try to flip him. He's only told us he's solid with Texas. I think he's very happy with Texas. But again, when the in-state schools come calling, kids listen and you can't fault them. So that's a situation we're watching. But KJ is supposed to be on campus with him this weekend for his official visit. So, we're going to try to cover that as best we can and, see what he says. And I'm sure Texas will roll out the red carpet as they should. And we'll see if something happens. But that's another thing we're watching. And then, this junior day just wrapped up. We're still, kind of putting all the reaction from that. I mean, I think we probably have about 40 or 50 interviews that, we're still putting up as the days go by. But it's a pretty crazy time.
Yeah, get over to horns247.com to keep up with all of Hank's recruiting coverage. It is lively, to say the least.